Introduction. Friends, if you're in a mood to experience a film that's not your typical blockbuster, but something raw, real, and quietly powerful, then Elephant 2003 is a movie you need to know about. And if this is your first time visiting our channel, don't forget to subscribe, because we bring you deep dives, insights, and everything you need to know about some of the most unique films out there. Today's video is all about Elephant, a film that doesn't shout, but whispers in a way that echoes long after it ends. This isn't just a film you watch. It's a film you feel, a film you absorb, and a film that lingers in your thoughts. So if you're ready to discover a movie that challenges the way we think about storytelling and cinema, stay with us till the end. We're going to explore everything you need to know about Elephant. What is this movie really about? Why did it spark so much conversation when it was released? Where can you watch it right now, whether you're looking for it on streaming platforms or satellite TV channels? We'll give you the complete rundown on its availability, so you don't miss out on this important piece of cinema. But that's just the beginning. We'll also dive deep into the technical side of things. This film is a visual experience as much as it is an emotional one. We'll talk about how the cinematography plays a major role in telling the story, especially those long, unbroken tracking shots that follow characters down school hallways, through fields, and into moments that feel startlingly real. We'll discuss how the camera work, sound design, and minimalistic approach to music all combine to create a mood that's both haunting and hypnotic. Then we'll take a look behind the scenes at the production process. From pre-production choices to filming techniques, everything in this movie was designed with a very specific tone and purpose. You'll find out why the director Gus Van Sant made certain choices, how non-professional actors were cast to create a sense of realism, and what kind of post-production editing helped shape the film into what it became. We'll also look at the budget and how this relatively low-cost film managed to gain international recognition, including winning the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Yes, we'll also talk box office, how it performed, what kind of audience it reached, and why it continues to be discussed even years after its release. Of course, we'll walk through the storyline, but not just a flat summary. We'll guide you through the structure of the film, how time overlaps between characters, and why the pacing feels so different compared to other movies. We'll talk about the high school setting, the normal day that slowly unfolds into tragedy, and how the movie chooses not to sensationalize its subject matter, but instead lets it play out in a quiet, observational style. I'll also give you my brief review of the story, how it works, what it says about society, and why its understated style can feel even more powerful than an action-packed drama. We'll take time to talk about the performances, too. The cast of Elephant is made up mostly of unknown actors, many of whom were real high school students. But that's part of what makes the film feel so real. These aren't polished Hollywood portrayals. These are kids who feel like kids, with dialogue that feels natural and movements that don't seem scripted. We'll talk about who played which role, how they contributed to the film's realism, and why that choice matters so much for this particular story. And lastly, we'll uncover some fascinating facts and behind-the-scenes insights. Why is it called Elephant? What inspired Gus Van Sant to make this film? How does it relate to real-life events? And why did he choose such a quiet, almost dreamlike tone to portray something so dark? These questions and more will be answered as we unpack everything about this unforgettable piece of cinema. So grab a seat, stay with us till the end, and let's explore the quiet yet powerful world of Elephant. Let's get started. The story of Elephant doesn't unfold the way most moviegoers might expect. Instead of building momentum with traditional three-act structure, it glides through the day like a quiet observer. There's no loud exposition, no dramatic soundtrack cues to tell you how to feel, and definitely no clear main character to cling to. What the film does, though, is drop you directly into the lives of various high school students on an ordinary day, a day that we slowly begin to understand is anything but ordinary. The film opens with John, a student driving his father, who's drunk, through the streets to drop him off. It seems mundane at first, just a slice of a kid's morning. But already, there's a strange tension in the stillness. After John enters the school, the camera follows him in a long tracking shot, a stylistic choice that becomes the heartbeat of the film. We don't jump quickly from scene to scene. Instead, we walk with the characters, literally, down hallways, through empty rooms, across fields. We're made to linger. That's one of the film's most deliberate choices. Time isn't rushed. It unfolds naturally, slowly, and sometimes loops back. Here's where the nonlinear storytelling comes into play. The movie introduces us to different students one by one. Elias, the shy photographer, Michelle, the awkward library assistant, Nathan and Carrie, the seemingly perfect couple, Eric and Alex, the outcast teens, and then circles back to show events from overlapping angles. We might see one scene from John's point of view, and later, the same moment from Elias's path crossing nearby. It's like walking through a painting from multiple angles, and each shift in perspective reveals something new. And through all this wandering and drifting, we start to notice something strange. There are small signs of something darker coming. Nothing is stated outright, but you catch it. A comment here, a glance there, the odd tone in someone's voice. The tension is slow burning, almost invisible at first. We see Eric and Alex ordering weapons online, playing violent video games, rehearsing with piano, and making ominous plans. The film never presents them as theatrical villains. They're just two more students, seen with the same quiet lens as everyone else. Then comes the moment when they arrive at the school with duffel bags. The film doesn't explode into chaos. Instead, it tightens. The quiet becomes unbearable. The gunshots ring out with a chilling lack of cinematic flair. There's no dramatic score, just the sound of footsteps, screams, and silence. The horror unfolds as if it were any other scene. Matter of fact, observational, and heartbreakingly calm. It's terrifying precisely because it feels so real. One of the most jarring aspects is that Elephant refuses to provide easy answers. It doesn't explain why the shooting happens, or ask you to sympathize or condemn. It just shows. That choice in itself is one of the most unconventional narrative turns the film takes. The final moments are not tied up with a bow. There's no resolution, no aftermath, no lesson spelled out. The movie ends in the middle of it all, in a way that's meant to leave you stunned, grasping for meaning in the stillness. The emotional impact sneaks up on you. What began as a meandering day in the life becomes a stark portrayal of violence erupting in a place that was supposed to be safe. The narrative doesn't tell you how to feel. It lets you walk beside these characters until the unthinkable occurs. It experiments with time and perspective not for the sake of cleverness, but to mirror the disorienting way real tragedy unfolds. Out of nowhere, touching everyone differently and never quite making sense. What makes Elephant unique isn't just its structure. It's the way that structure reflects the confusion, the calm, and the chaos of life interrupted. There's no single protagonist, no heroic arc, no villain monologue. Just a quiet school, students with their own little lives, and a day that changes everything. The narrative is like a slow breath that ends in a gasp, leaving the viewer caught somewhere between understanding and shock. It's simple in form, but haunting in impact. In Elephant, character development doesn't follow the traditional path of setup, conflict, and transformation. There are no dramatic confessions, no sweeping arcs, and definitely no one riding off into sunset. Instead, the characters are presented in a way that mirrors real life, subtle, minimal, and at times, achingly mundane. And that's exactly where the brilliance lies. The characters feel like people you've met. They walk, talk, and exist with the quiet ordinariness of everyday teenagers. They aren't types or caricatures. They're slices of lives caught in the middle of unfolding tragedy. Take John, for instance. He's the first student we really spend time with, and his story begins not in school, but in a car, dealing with his drunk father. He's just a kid trying to get through the day, embarrassed, exhausted, but carrying on. He doesn't undergo a grand transformation. There's no big monologue waiting for him at the end. What we see is a glimpse, a moment in time where his experience becomes part of a much larger, tragic canvas. And that's the approach the film takes with nearly every character. It shows us who they are in their stillness, in their routine, before that routine is shattered. Elias, the photography student, is another portrait of subtle humanity. We see him wander the school, snapping black and white photos, pausing to capture moments that feel meaningless at the time but gain eerie weight in retrospect. He's observant, quiet, seemingly untouched by the louder dramas around him. His camera becomes a symbol of both innocence and detachment. He's not someone who undergoes a huge personal journey, but he invites the audience to observe the world as he does, through small, thoughtful frames. Then there's Michelle, awkward and shy, struggling even with gym class, picked on and overlooked. Her scenes are painful in how familiar they feel, fumbling through social situations, being scolded for small things, carrying herself with a kind of invisible weight. She doesn't change in the film. She doesn't get a redemption moment, but she exists fully, quietly, and truthfully. That's what Elephant offers again and again. Characters whose depth isn't in grand gestures, but in tiny human details. And then come Eric and Alex, the two students behind the horrific act at the center of the story. The film doesn't frame them as one-dimensional villains. It doesn't ask you to feel sympathy or offer excuses, but it does show their world with the same detached lens as everyone else. We see them playing piano, showering together in an oddly quiet scene, ordering guns online, watching disturbing documentaries, and rehearsing for their attack. The absence of melodrama in their portrayal makes them even more unsettling. Their motivations are left vague, their emotional states hard to pin down, but that's intentional. The film isn't trying to explain their actions. It's showing how these two boys drifted through the same hallways as everyone else until they didn't. The relationships between characters are thin but meaningful. There are fragments, a glance between classmates, a comment passed in the hallway, a shared lunch, a silent tension. The film doesn't dive deep into any single connection, but it sketches out a network of interactions that feel real. Nathan and Carrie, the school's golden couple, seem perfectly put together on the outside, but their scenes hint at shallow routines and emotional distance. Brittany, Jordan, and Nicole gossip in the cafeteria, only to later purge their lunches in synchronized silence, highlighting the strange pressures of image and conformity. These aren't deep relationships in the traditional storytelling sense, but they are layered in suggestion. The unspoken carries just as much weight as the spoken. No one undergoes a grand transformation in Elephant. That's part of what makes it so haunting. These characters don't know they're in a story. They don't get the chance to grow or evolve or come full circle. They're just living, some of them awkwardly, some of them joyfully, some of them invisibly, when everything is suddenly and violently interrupted. The lack of character arcs isn't a weakness. It's the entire point. These were people mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-thought. Their lives weren't stories. They were realities cut short. The film doesn't sculpt them into dramatic heroes or villains. It captures them just as they are, and in doing so, makes their loss hit even harder. The performances in Elephant don't come from seasoned movie stars, trained theater professionals, or anyone with a long IMDb resume. Instead, most of the cast were non-professional, real teenagers cast locally, many of them using their own names for their characters. That's not just a gimmick. It's a decision that gives the film an eerily authentic texture. These actors aren't performing in the traditional sense. They're existing, reacting, drifting through the school halls like kids you've passed 100 times before. And that, surprisingly, becomes the film's most compelling performance style. Let's start with John Robinson as John. From the very first scene, where he drives his intoxicated father through the streets, there's a raw, unfiltered quality to his presence. He doesn't emote in a dramatic way. There are no forced lines or overwrought expressions. He speaks like someone who's tired, distracted, just trying to get through another typical day. It's natural and understated, but deeply effective. His body language, hunched posture, slowed walk, darting glances, tells you more than any monologue could. He anchors the film's opening tone with a weariness that feels lived in. Then you have Elias McConnell, playing Elias, the quiet photographer who floats through the school with his camera. His performance is almost hypnotic. He doesn't say much, but that's what makes him interesting. His expressions are minimal, but his eyes are constantly observing. Every time he lifts his camera, it feels like he's trying to make sense of the world through a lens, capturing moments others pass by. There's a sincerity to his performance that stands out because it's so unpolished. He isn't acting in a traditional way. He's just being. Kristen Hicks as Michelle is another highlight. Her awkwardness is almost painful to watch, and that's what makes it real. Whether she's stumbling through gym class in oversized clothes or dealing with a stern librarian, Her discomfort radiates off the screen, but she never slips into parody. She carries herself with the insecurity of someone who feels out of place in every room, and it's hard not to connect with that vulnerability. Her entire presence feels like a whisper, something easily overlooked if you're not paying attention. But once you do, you realize how deeply she's inhabiting that feeling of being invisible. And then, of course, there are Eric Deulen and Alex Frost, who play the shooters. Their performances are among the most chilling in the film, precisely because they are so quiet and devoid of theatrical menace. They don't give you a big villain moment. There are no angry rants, no wide-eyed breakdowns. Instead, you see boys who act like they're going through routine, as if they're preparing for a class project instead of something horrifying. One moment they're calmly playing a Beethoven piece. The next they're pulling out firearms. The emotional detachment in their performances is what makes it so disturbing. They're not playing monsters. They're playing boys who seem frighteningly ordinary. That choice is what haunts the viewer long after. What's remarkable is how the ensemble works together, not by bouncing off each other in dramatic confrontations, but by coexisting in shared spaces. Cafeteria tables, locker rooms, classrooms. Every setting is filled with naturalistic performances that overlap like threads in a tapestry. Conversations feel like real teenage chatter. There's no scripted polish. People talk over each other, mumble, pause awkwardly. It's this improvisational energy that breathes life into the environment. Even the smallest roles leave an impression. The trio of girls in the cafeteria, Brittany, Nicole, and Jordan, bring out the cliquey rhythms of teenage life in a way that's both funny and uncomfortable. Their synchronized eating and bathroom scenes don't need words to express the pressure and conformity they're locked into. Their performances are not loud or flashy, but they're revealing in how much they convey through repetition and silence. No one in this cast is putting on a performance for the camera. They're letting the camera observe them, and that shift is what gives Elephant its emotional depth. It's not about who gives the best performance. It's about how every performer, by being grounded and understated, adds to the film's overwhelming sense of realism. These actors don't pull you out of the story. They pull you deeper into it, until it feels like you're walking the halls with them, watching the day unfold moment by moment. The result is something haunting, not because of how much the characters say, but because of how real they feel just before everything breaks. When it comes to the direction of Elephant, Gus Van Sant doesn't just guide the film. He sculpts it like a slow-moving dream that drifts quietly toward a nightmare. His choices are precise, yet they never feel forceful. He doesn't push the audience. He doesn't lead with a heavy hand. Instead, he opens a door and invites us to follow. What makes this direction so compelling is how invisible it feels at first, until you realize just how deeply it's guiding your emotional state every step of the way. Let's talk about tone. The entire film feels wrapped in a blanket of eerie stillness. The quiet isn't empty, it's loaded. From the first few moments, Van Sant sets a mood that feels calm on the surface, but strangely unsettled underneath. This is not achieved with dramatic music or suspense-building tricks. In fact, there's almost no score at all. Instead, he lets the ambient sound of hallways, nature, footsteps, and distant chatter do all the heavy lifting. The result is a tone that feels uncannily real, like you're standing just out of frame watching things unfold naturally. And that stillness becomes more unnerving the longer it lingers. One of Van Sant's boldest stylistic decisions is the use of long, unbroken tracking shots. He doesn't cut frantically between angles or whip the camera around. Instead, he lets it float, following characters from behind as they walk through school corridors, across grassy fields, or into quiet rooms. These long takes slow everything down, force us to observe, and eliminate the traditional rhythm of editing that tells us when to feel something. There are no dramatic zooms or sudden cuts, just slow, deliberate movement that mirrors the rhythm of life on an uneventful school day. It's so simple it becomes hypnotic, and it's exactly what makes the sudden shift into horror all the more jarring later on. Van Sant also experiments with structure in a way that breaks from convention without feeling showy. The film doesn't tell its story in a straight line. Instead, it loops back in time, following different students through overlapping timelines. One moment you're with John, then you're with Elias, and suddenly you're seeing the same scene again, but from a different hallway, a different angle, a different experience. This circular approach to time creates a sense of inevitability. You know something is coming, but it doesn't arrive with a countdown. It builds quietly as paths cross and moments echo each other. This non-linear storytelling feels like drifting through a memory or walking to a fragment of a dream just before waking. Visually, Van Sant keeps things simple, but nothing is accidental. The color palette is soft, washed out, and realistic. The school doesn't look like a movie set. It looks like any high school. The lighting is natural. The rooms are ordinary. The props are what you'd expect. That realism makes everything else more impactful. When the violence begins, there's no shift in style. No dramatic lighting change. No shaking camera. No slow-motion theatrics. It unfolds with the same calm observation as everything else. That choice, keeping the aesthetic consistent even in chaos, is what gives the film its raw power. Pacing is another daring move. This is not a fast film. It takes its time, and then it takes some more. You sit with characters as they walk from one end of a hallway to another, as they open lockers, as they sit in silence. Some might call it slow, but that slowness is essential. It mimics the way a real day feels, unhurried, unpredictable, sometimes boring. Van Sant is deliberately resisting the urge to entertain in a traditional sense. Instead, he immerses. He allows the audience to feel the passage of time, to feel the lull of routine, and then to feel that routine violently interrupted. What's truly unique about the direction here is how much trust it places in silence and space. Van Sant doesn't fill the film with answers. He doesn't give speeches or emotional climaxes. He avoids judgment. He lets viewers do the work. That takes confidence and restraint. There's a haunting neutrality to the direction, as if the camera is simply bearing witness. But make no mistake, it's a controlled vision. Every angle, every sound, every moment of silence is a calculated part of the experience. You're not being told how to feel. You're being given space to feel it on your own. Van Sant shapes Elephant not like a conventional narrative, but like a slow-burning painting where time loops, silence weighs heavy, and the horror arrives not with scream, but with a quiet door opening down the hall. His direction doesn't just guide the story. It defines its emotional logic, its pace, and its unforgettable impact. The cinematography in Elephant isn't just a visual style. It's the soul of the film. It takes the story's quiet, slow-burning tension and turns it into something you don't just watch, but feel deep in your bones. The camera work here, designed by Harris Savides, doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't dazzle with big sweeping shots or dramatic close-ups. Instead, it floats, it follows, it observes, and that observational quality becomes the film's emotional engine, generating mood, tension, and meaning without ever needing to speak a word. One of the most distinctive choices is the use of long, unbroken tracking shots. These aren't just cinematic tricks. They're the film's heartbeat. The camera often follows behind characters as they walk through the school, as if we're tagging along quietly, just another student wandering the halls. This kind of camera movement creates a deep sense of immersion. It feels like you're inside the school yourself, not watching a dramatized version of it, but walking the same floors, hearing the same muffled chatter, seeing the same familiar lockers and walls. These long takes slow time down and erase the artificial rhythms of typical editing, letting scenes unfold in real time. And that realism makes everything feel unsettlingly normal. Until it's not. Framing an Elephant is deceptively simple but incredibly precise. Characters are often centered in the frame, and the camera follows their backs as they move forward. There's no over-the-shoulder dramatics or reaction-heavy coverage. This gives a sense of detachment, a feeling that you're watching life unfold with no control over what's coming. The use of negative space is also powerful. Hallways stretch out endlessly. Classrooms sit half empty, and open fields feel both peaceful and ominous. The empty spaces around the characters speak volumes about isolation, routine, and the quiet before the storm. Lighting, too, is kept naturalistic. Most of the film is lit with ambient light, sun filtering through windows, fluorescent bulbs overhead. It doesn't glamorize the school or heighten reality in any way. Instead, it captures the bland, overexposed look of a real public high school. That decision strips away any sense of fiction. You feel like this could be your school, your hallway, your classmates. And when the violence begins, there's no visual shift, no dark shadows, no stylized chaos. The horror happens in the same lighting as the morning announcements. That's what makes it terrifying. And then there are the moments where stillness becomes beauty. Elias's photography scenes, for instance, offer subtle visual poetry. We see his black and white shots develop in real time, each image capturing students mid-laugh, mid-stare, mid-motion. The camera gently shifts from these printed photos to the real-life scenes, blurring the line between art and reality. It's a quiet visual motif, but it resonates. Through Elias's lens, we're reminded of how fleeting these moments are, how easily a smile frozen on paper becomes a memory once the day takes its turn. The most striking visual moments don't scream. They whisper. A character walking alone down an empty hall. A pair of shoes resting under a bench. A classroom door left slightly ajar. These images stay with you because they feel like glimpses into a life about to be disrupted. The cinematography captures this looming unease without flashy effects or harsh contrasts. It doesn't need to look dark to feel dark. When the violence finally erupts, the camera doesn't change its behavior. It stays calm, steady, and observational. That's the most chilling part. There's no handheld panic, no frantic cuts. Just the same quiet camera that followed a student to class is now following a shooter down a hallway. This lack of dramatization makes the horror more disturbing. The tension comes not from what you're being shown, but from how it's being shown. Like the camera is witnessing something too real to turn away from. In Elephant, the cinematography acts like a silent ghost in the school, drifting through scenes, hovering behind students, capturing life as it is, not as a movie wants it to be. It creates tension by refusing to cut away. It creates beauty by letting the ordinary shine. And it creates fear by treating the extraordinary as just another moment in an ordinary day. The result is a visual experience that feels both hauntingly intimate and emotionally distant, like looking at a memory you can't quite hold on to, but can't forget either. The editing and pacing of Elephant don't just support the film story. They're the story's rhythm. This isn't a movie where scenes zip along with quick cuts or momentum-building music. There's no clock ticking the background, no rising action marching toward a climax. Instead, the film flows like a slow-moving stream, steady, quiet, and at times almost hypnotic. But don't mistake the lack of urgency for a lack of purpose. Every pause, every stretch of silence, every moment that lingers longer than expected is intentional. The pacing is slow, yes, but it's slow with meaning. From the very first sequence, the editing sets the tone. We're introduced to characters one by one, not through dialogue-heavy scenes or dramatic entrances, but through long, unbroken shots that follow them in real time. The edits are sparse, and when they do come, they're quiet, never jarring or flashy. Transitions between scenes often feel like gentle shifts in direction rather than hard cuts. You'll move from one character's experience to another seamlessly, sometimes even looping back to a moment you've already seen, but now from a different perspective. This overlapping structure creates a dreamy, nonlinear flow that mirrors the way memories unfold in your mind. Slow, disjointed, and reflective. And here's where it gets really clever. Because of the way the story is edited, you're constantly aware of time passing, but you're not always sure where you are in the timeline. You might be watching Elias walk through the hallway, just seconds after seeing John do the same thing. Or maybe it was earlier, or later. The film's circular editing design makes time feel fluid, and that adds to the underlying tension. You start noticing how all these characters are slowly converging, unknowingly walking toward the same place, the same moment, the same event. The editing lets you see their paths crisscross, but it never tells you exactly when things will break. That builds suspense in a quiet, unnerving way. The pacing isn't here to thrill you. It's here to immerse you. It's designed to make you feel like you're truly walking through that school, like you're watching life in real time. You follow students as they walk, sit, eat, stare out windows. There are no montages, no jump cuts, no scenes that rush to the point. This pacing can feel strange at first, almost too slow, but then it begins to work on you. You fall into the rhythm. You begin to sense that something is off, not because the film tells you so, but because the pacing won't let you escape the ordinary. It traps you in the calm, which makes what comes later feel even more chaotic. And yet, when the chaos does arrive, the editing doesn't change its style. It doesn't speed up or collapse time. The same pacing continues, the same long takes, the same steady flow. Only now the content is turned deadly. That consistency is what makes the violence so disturbing. You're not given emotional distance through quick edits or dramatic music. The rhythm remains calm, cold, and observational. It forces you to stay in the moment, to experience the horror in real time with no cinematic escape hatch. There's a kind of patience in the editing that's rare. It refuses to rush. It refuses to entertain in the traditional sense. It trusts the audience to sit in discomfort, to watch things unfold at a human pace, not a movie pace. It mirrors the experience of a regular day, where time drags, where everything feels routine, until that day is forever split into before and after. And by the end, you realize the film's rhythm has worked like a slow inhale. No fast cuts, no speed ramps, just one long breath that ends in silence. What's fascinating is that this editing style doesn't feel clinical. It's not robotic. It has a pulse. It's just a slow, steady one. You start to feel it in your body, like your own heartbeat slowing as you watch. And when that rhythm is finally interrupted by the unthinkable, you feel the shock not because the film suddenly changes gears, but because it doesn't. The editing stays calm. The camera doesn't flinch. And that stillness is what leaves the deepest bruise. The pacing might test your patience, but it does so with purpose. It wants you to walk through the day, step by step, breath by breath, until you realize you walked into something you can't walk out of. The soundtrack and score of Elephant don't behave the way you'd expect music to behave in a film, and that's exactly the point. Instead of dictating emotions or underlining dramatic turns, the sound design here chooses a path of restraint. It's not a traditional soundtrack packed with swelling strings or booming crescendos. In fact, most of the time, Elephant leans into silence, those long, quiet stretches where all you hear are footsteps on linoleum, the distant murmur of students, the rustling of wind. This silence isn't empty. It's loaded. It fills the film with an atmosphere of quiet tension, as if something is waiting just outside the frame. But that doesn't mean music is completely absent. When it appears, it's carefully chosen and placed, not to manipulate, but to echo the stillness and surreal nature of the story. One of the most haunting musical choices is Beethoven for Elise, which isn't used with classical polish or elegance. It's awkwardly played by one of the shooters, Alex, on a home piano. The piece is familiar, almost comforting, and hearing it performed in such a casual, slightly imperfect way adds an eerie sense of normalcy to something that shouldn't feel normal. It's a moment where music becomes a character in the scene, not by telling you how to feel, but by clashing subtly with what you know is coming. That musical moment works because of its contrast with the silence that dominates the rest of the film. Silence in Elephant isn't just background, it's part of the narrative. You become hyper-aware of every door opening, every page turning, every breath. These everyday sounds are heightened by the absence of traditional scoring, turning the mundane into something that feels suspenseful. The film trains your ears to listen differently. You start tuning into the rhythms of the school itself, the bells, the locker slams, the shuffle of sneakers in a hallway, and suddenly those sounds feel emotionally charged, even when nothing is happening on screen. There are also brief uses of ambient tones and minimalistic piano cues that drift in and out without calling attention to themselves. These are not full compositions. They're more like emotional brushstrokes, atmospheric nudges that suggest unease or distance without ever becoming dominant. You might not even notice them on a first watch. That's how seamlessly they're woven into the film's texture. It's like sound is breathing alongside the camera, moving in and out of focus depending on what the scene needs. One of the most powerful effects of this sparse approach is how it leaves space for your own emotional response. With no musical cues telling you when to be sad or tense, you're left to sit in the moment and feel what comes naturally. And when the violence finally erupts, the absence of a dramatic score makes it even more chilling. The gunfire doesn't compete with music. There's no action track, no percussion, just the cold, echoing sound of a gunshot in a hallway. It's horrifying precisely because there's no cinematic buffer. Nothing shields you from it. And this choice to use silence as much as if not more than music is a key part of what makes the film feel so real. It refuses to stylize tragedy. It refuses to soften the blow with emotional underscoring. Instead, it lets the soundscape mimic the unpredictable quiet of real life, where things happen not to a soundtrack, but in silence, with all the weight and awkwardness of reality. So while Elephant doesn't boast a traditional score full of recurring motifs or grand compositions, it uses sound and the lack of it with masterful intent. The music that does exist is quiet, deliberate, and deeply unsettling in its contrast to the horror that unfolds. The silence that surrounds it, even louder. It's not there to entertain your ears. It's there to make them feel. Every note, every pause, every breath of quiet becomes part of a chilling soundscape that doesn't just support the story. It becomes a heartbeat of it. Elephant is like a quiet puzzle that doesn't hand you the picture on the box. Instead, it nudges you to piece together its themes slowly, almost like walking through a fog where every step reveals something new and unsettling. The film doesn't spell out its messages with a megaphone. It doesn't preach or lecture. It simply places you in the middle of a day that seems ordinary but is quietly fractured, and from that everyday fragility, bigger ideas start to emerge. One of the most striking themes is the idea of invisibility. How easily people, especially teenagers, can slip into the background of their own lives and the lives of those around them. The film's characters are often isolated, not because they're loners by choice, but because the social structures around them, cliques, routines, expectations, keep them separated. You see it in the way Michelle is awkward and overlooked, in the silence between friends, in the casual cruelty of gossip and exclusion. The film's slow pacing and detached camera work make this invisibility palpable, almost like a physical space you move through. The message isn't shouted, but it's there. Sometimes the most tragic moments happen in the spaces where people feel unseen. Another powerful theme is the banality of violence. The idea that horrific acts can erupt out of seemingly mundane settings, without fanfare or obvious warning signs. Elephant doesn't glamorize violence. It doesn't build tension with explosions or dramatic soundtracks. Instead, it lets violence sneak in almost unnoticed, growing out of normal interactions, ignored emotions, and invisible pain. The shooters aren't portrayed as monsters. They're just kids, blending into hallways and classrooms, carrying out something unfathomable in a setting that feels ordinary and safe. This theme forces you to reckon with how fragile safety can be, and how violence can be woven into the fabric of daily life without anyone fully understanding why. The film also explores the disconnection between appearance and reality. Characters like Nathan and Carrie seem like the perfect couple, but their scenes hint at emotional distance beneath the surface. The cheerful chatter in the cafeteria masks underlying tensions. The school itself looks normal, even bland, but behind that normalcy lurks something dangerous and unseen. Elephant plays with this contrast to highlight how easily we can be fooled by surface impressions and how complex, and sometimes tragic, the lives beneath those surfaces can be. There's also an underlying meditation on routine and how it both grounds and traps us. The characters move through their day like clockwork, locker to class to lunch, lunch to hallways, repeating rituals that seem safe but also imprisoning. The film's pacing and repetitive shots echo this sense of monotony. The tragedy that unfolds shatters this routine, but the way the day loops back on itself visually suggests how difficult it is to break free from cycles of isolation, misunderstanding, and violence. Importantly, Elephant doesn't offer clear answers or solutions. It's less about diagnosing causes and more about showing the messy, confusing reality of youth violence and alienation. This ambiguity can be frustrating, but it's also what makes the themes linger. You don't walk away with neat explanations. Instead, you're left sitting with questions about society, about the invisible struggles people carry, and about how ordinary moments can ripple into something devastating. The film also quietly touches on broader social issues like bullying, the pressure to conform, and the failures of adult institutions to notice or intervene. But it never feels like a textbook or a PSA. Instead, these ideas weave into the fabric of the characters' lives and the film's atmosphere, giving viewers room to think and feel rather than telling them what to think. In the end, Elephant works like a mirror held up to everyday life, reflecting back the quiet tensions, invisibilities, and fractures that too often go unnoticed. Its themes don't hit you over the head. They sneak in under your skin and stay with you, asking you to look closer at the world around you and the people who walk through it. It's a film that whispers its messages, but those whispers echo long after the screen goes dark. When it comes to Elephant, visual effects and CGI are hardly the star of the show. In fact, they're barely noticeable, and that's exactly the way the film wants it. This isn't a movie that calls attention to digital wizardry or flashy effects. Instead, it grounds itself firmly in the real world, the everyday spaces of high school, captured with unvarnished simplicity. The film's power comes from its raw realism, so any use of effects is subtle, almost invisible, working quietly behind the scenes to support the story rather than steal it. Because Elephant focuses on naturalism and observation, most of what you see on screen relies on practical effects, or, better yet, none at all. The everyday school environment, the students, the hallways, the classrooms, are all tangible and authentic, shot in real locations with minimal interference. There's no need for CGI to create grandiose set pieces or fantastical elements. This absence of obvious effects helps immerse you in the ordinary world of the characters, making their experiences feel immediate and believable. Even in the moments where violence occurs, the film opts for practical, understated effects rather than dramatic, digital spectacle. Gunshots in the aftermath are portrayed with a kind of matter-of-fact detachment, without exaggerated blood splatter or slow-motion explosions. The use of practical effects here is restrained and realistic, designed to avoid sensationalism and keep the audience grounded in the stark reality of the moment. This choice makes the violence all more chilling, because it feels disturbingly real, not dramatized for effect. There might be minor digital touch-ups or cleanup work, like smoothing out continuity, enhancing lighting subtly, or editing takes for seamless flow, but none of it is flashy or meant to draw attention. The effects team's job in Elephant is to disappear, to blend so completely with the live-action footage that viewers never notice their hand. This invisible craftsmanship supports the film's overall aesthetic of authenticity. In comparison to many films that use CGI to dazzle or create spectacle, Elephant's minimalist approach feels refreshing. The film trusts real people and real places to carry the story, rather than relying on visual trickery. The lack of overt effects contributes to the film's haunting atmosphere. The emptiness and silence aren't filled with digital noise, but with the weight of reality. So, if you're watching Elephant expecting flashy visuals or noticeable CGI, you'll find yourself waiting in vain. But if you appreciate the subtle artistry of visual effects that hide in plain sight, quietly enhancing immersion without distracting from the human story, then this film delivers exactly that. It's a masterclass in letting the real world speak for itself, using effects not as spectacle, but as invisible glue holding the raw footage together in seamless, haunting harmony. The set design and locations in Elephant play a surprisingly powerful role in shaping the film's atmosphere. Even though at first glance they might seem almost invisible, just ordinary school spaces you might recognize from your own teenage years. But therein lies the genius. The production design doesn't shout, "Look at me!" Instead, it masterfully recreates the banal, everyday environment of a typical high school with such authenticity that the spaces themselves become characters, silently telling their own stories. The school setting feels completely lived in and unpolished. There are lockers lining the halls, peeling paint on the walls, faded posters advertising school events, and worn floors scuffed from years of footsteps. The cafeteria isn't shiny or glamorous. It's a slightly grimy, echoey room filled with plastic trays, noisy chatter, and teenagers juggling social hierarchies. Classrooms feel sterile but real, with desks arranged in rows, white-barred with half-erased notes, and random bits of school supplies scattered about. These details ground the film in a very specific, recognizable reality. No Hollywood gloss, no idealized version of teenage life. The locations themselves, mostly a real high school, add an immense depth to the story because they're so ordinary. There's a power in how Elephant shows us these spaces as mundane, everyday places where young lives unfold without fanfare, yet are ripe with tension and unspoken stories. Hallways stretch endlessly, turning corners into unknowns. The empty gym feels cavernous, almost haunting in its silence. The outdoor shots of lawns and parking lots feel spacious, but strangely isolating. The school is both a container for normal teenage routines and a stage for the film's creeping dread. What's visually compelling is how the camera drifts through these spaces, lingering on details that might usually be overlooked. The flickering fluorescent lights, a forgotten water bottle on the floor, a pair of sneakers waiting beneath a bench. These small touches create texture, making the environment feel tactile and real. The school isn't just a backdrop. It's a world alive with quiet rhythms and unseen pressures. Even outside the school, the film uses location to echo its themes. The suburban streets, the bus stops, the houses with picket fences all feel familiar and safe on the surface, but when paired with the unfolding narrative, they take on a more unsettling meaning. These ordinary places become the setting for something extraordinary and tragic, highlighting how horror can seep into the most commonplace corners of life. Props are handled with the same understated care. Students carry backpacks slung over one shoulder, clutch notebooks, fidget with cell phones, and wear everyday clothes that fit effortlessly into their characters' personalities. There are no flashy accessories or costumes here, just real teenagers, and the items they use feel like natural extensions of their world. What stands out is the lack of any visual spectacle or artificiality. The production design doesn't try to impress with bold or elaborate sets. Instead, it earns its impact through meticulous attention to small, real details. The world of Elephant is believable because it's stripped down to essentials, an authentic slice of American high school life, captured with quiet precision. In this way, the settings and production design don't just create a believable world. They deepen the emotional impact of the story. They remind us that tragedy can occur not on fantastical stages, but in the very spaces we pass through every day. The film's world feels real, unvarnished, and hauntingly familiar, making the story's unfolding horror all the more piercing. The dialogue in Elephant is almost like a ghost present, but elusive, barely catching your attention because it's so natural, so unforced, and so quietly delivered. This film isn't about memorable one-liners or sharp exchanges that stick with you long after credits roll. Instead, it's about the silence between words, the pauses, the half-finished sentences, and the way teenagers speak when they're not trying to perform or impress. The script feels like eavesdropping on real conversations rather than reading from a page, and that's where its unique power lies. Conversations in Elephant aren't packed with emotional fireworks or dramatic reveals. They're often mundane, snippets of gossip, awkward small talk, casual teasing, or quiet moments of hesitation. Sometimes characters barely say anything at all. You get the feeling these are kids trying to fit in or simply navigate the awkwardness of youth, rather than deliver lines crafted to move a plot forward. The result is dialogue that feels utterly authentic, a kind of teenage realism that's hard to fake. It's like the film captures the in-between moments, the conversations that don't feel important until you realize they're the ones shaping these characters' worlds. There's no flourish or attempt at wit, but in that restraint, the dialogue often carries a subtle emotional weight. A simple "are you okay?" in the hallway, a barely audible complaint about gym class, or a whispered exchange in cafeteria suddenly becomes heavy with meaning because of what's left unsaid. The script trusts the silences and the pauses just as much as the words. It's in those gaps that tension builds, relationships form or unravel, and characters reveal who they really are without ever having to say it outright. Because the dialogue is so minimalistic, there aren't really standout defining lines or quotes you find on a movie poster or tattooed on a fan's arm. Instead, the impact comes from the natural rhythm and flow of speech, how people interrupt each other, how they trail off, how they mumble or glance away mid-sentence. These imperfect, unpolished moments create a texture of speech that feels lived in, making the world of the film feel tangible and immediate. Interestingly, the script avoids exposition and backstory dumps. Instead of explaining motivations or history through dialogue, it lets characters exist in the moment. You don't get grand confessions or dramatic speeches. You get fragments of life. That can be frustrating if you're used to traditional storytelling, but it's also what makes Elephant so immersive. You have to pay attention to tone, context, and body language to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Even the scenes involving the shooters have dialogue that's chilling precisely because it's so ordinary. Their conversations about ordering guns online or rehearsing their plan are casual, almost banal, lacking the fiery rage or emotional outbursts you might expect. This makes their actions feel all the more disturbing. Not because they scream, but because they whisper, as if horror can hide in the quietest words. In short, Elephant script is a masterclass in subtlety. It doesn't rely on dramatic dialogue or clever lines. Instead, it offers conversation that feel like real life, awkward, quiet, sometimes painful, often unfinished. The dialogue fades into background just enough that the silences shout louder, and that's where the true emotional resonance lives. It's a reminder that what's not said can carry as much meaning as what is, and that sometimes the most powerful script is the one that simply lets people talk or not talk, like they really do. Elephant is a fascinating film because it plays with genre expectations in a way that feels both fresh and unsettling. At first glance, you might be tempted to slot it into the drama or thriller category, maybe even the school shooting subgenre, given its subject matter. But what it does with those labels is far from conventional. Instead of following the typical rules, building suspense with jump cuts, heightening tension with dramatic music, or giving clear motives and character backstories, it completely subverts almost every genre cliché you'd expect. This film rejects the typical thriller's adrenaline rush and instead embraces a slow, meditative pace. There's no pulse-pounding chase, no frantic score urging you on. The tension doesn't come from quick cuts or cliffhangers, but from watching everyday moments stretch out until they become charged with silent dread. It's like the genre has been stripped down to its barest bones and rebuilt as a quiet study of routine interrupted. The absence of traditional genre elements creates a space where discomfort simmers rather than explodes. When it comes to drama, Elephant doesn't dramatize emotions in the way many films do. Instead of big confrontations or tearful confessions, the drama lives in small, almost imperceptible moments: an awkward glance, a failed attempt to connect, a quiet isolation. There's no easy resolution, no catharsis. The characters don't grow in neat arcs. They exist in fragments. This fragmented, observational approach feels less like a traditional narrative and more like a slice of life frozen at a breaking point. The film also sidesteps the cliché of explaining why violence happens. Unlike many movies that dig into backstories or psychological profiles, Elephant offers no neat answers. The shooters are not painted as villains with clear motives or caricatures of evil. They are disturbing in their normalcy and silence. This choice challenges the usual genre formula that seeks to rationalize or justify characters' actions. Instead, the film asks the audience to sit with uncertainty, a bold move that unsettles expectations and forces deeper reflection. Humor? Not a priority here. Any light moments are fleeting and understated, more a reflection of teenage awkwardness than comic relief. The film's tone is consistently serious and haunting, rarely lifting into levity. That lack of humor further distances it from genre films that balance darkness with moments of release. The balance between suspense and drama is delicate and unusual. Suspense doesn't come from overt signals, but from the film's refusal to signal anything at all. The camera's steady observation, the pacing, and the structure generate a slow-building anxiety that feels almost invisible until it can't be ignored. This creates a tension that's more psychological and existential than physical. In many ways, Elephant redefines what a film about tragedy and violence can be. It avoids sensationalism, melodrama, and spectacle. Instead, it offers a quiet, deeply unsettling experience that makes you rethink the expectations of genre. The film doesn't fit neatly into boxes. It exists in the spaces between genres, blending elements of drama, thriller, and social commentary into something hauntingly original. If you're used to genre films that guide you through a clear emotional journey, Elephant will challenge you. It asks you to observe, to feel the mundane, and to sense the lurking dread without any of the usual signposts. In doing so, it doesn't just follow or subvert genre conventions. It almost creates a new genre of its own, one defined by silence, observation, and the slow unraveling of normalcy into tragedy. Elephant sneaks up on social and cultural commentary in the quietest, most unassuming way possible, almost like it's eavesdropping on a conversation nobody thought to have out loud. Instead of shouting its message or pointing fingers, the film invites viewers to slowly piece together what it's saying about youth violence and society through its careful observation of everyday life. It's a subtle kind of commentary that feels woven into the fabric of the film rather than pasted on top. One of the strongest statements the film makes is about the invisibility and isolation that many teenagers experience in modern culture. Elephant shows a world where kids drift through school corridors and classrooms, often disconnected from each other and from adults who seem oblivious to what's really going on beneath the surface. This isn't a world of open communication or supportive communities. It's one where silence reigns and where alienation festers quietly. The film captures this isolation not by preaching, but by simply letting us walk alongside these students, watching how easily they slip past each other without truly connecting. The film also comments on the normalization of violence and the way it's embedded in certain social environments. It doesn't sensationalize violence or treat it like a plot device. Instead, it presents it as a grim reality lurking just beneath the surface of ordinary school life. By showing how the shooters prepare in casual, almost banal ways, ordering guns online, rehearsing their plans without fanfare, the film points to uncomfortable truths about access to weapons and the failure of social structures to intervene effectively. The violence isn't portrayed as an outburst of pure evil, but as a symptom of deeper societal fractures. There's an unspoken critique of the ways schools and communities handle, or fail to handle, warning signs and troubled youth. Adults in the film are largely peripheral figures, often detached or unaware, reinforcing a sense that the systems in place aren't catching what matters until it's too late. The film doesn't offer easy solutions or dramatize confrontations with authority. It simply shows the gaps, the quiet spaces where warnings go unnoticed, and the consequences that follow. This approach feels raw and realistic, making the commentary feel earned rather than forced. Culturally, Elephant reflects on the pressures and confusions of adolescence in the late 90s to early 2000s American suburban setting, but its themes resonate broadly. It touches on issues of identity, conformity, and the often invisible struggles with mental health that many young people face. The characters are not stereotypes, but rather fragments of real lives, awkward, uncertain, and searching for belonging. The film's naturalistic style amplifies this by avoiding melodrama or caricature, making the cultural commentary feel lived in and authentic. Interestingly, the film sidesteps political polemics. It doesn't tackle gun control debates head-on or push a particular agenda. Instead, it focuses on human and social dimensions, asking viewers to sit with uncomfortable questions about community, connection, and responsibility. This subtlety allows the film's commentary to linger longer, inviting reflection rather than debate. In the end, Elephant's social and cultural commentary works precisely because it trusts the audience to notice the quiet details, the way kids navigate loneliness, how violence creeps into everyday spaces, and how societal blind spots can have tragic consequences. It's not a fiery manifesto, but a slow, observant meditation on complex issues that remain painfully relevant. The film's strength lies in how naturally these themes flow through its storytelling, making the commentary feel like part of the air you breathe rather than a forced lesson. Elephant doesn't hit you over the head with emotion. Instead, it sneaks in quietly and lodges itself deep under your skin. The film's emotional resonance isn't about big moments or sweeping gestures. It's found in the small, unsettling silences and the slow burn of everyday scenes that suddenly feel charged with meaning. Watching it feels like standing on the edge of something you don't fully understand, but can't look away from. You're drawn into this ordinary world of teenagers moving through their day, and all the while, a quiet dread bubbles beneath the surface, creating an emotional tension that's hard to shake. The film doesn't invite laughter or excitement in the traditional sense. Instead, it evokes a creeping unease that builds steadily, almost imperceptibly. There's an eerie stillness that lingers over mundane activities, a student tying their shoe, friends chatting in a hallway, someone taking pictures. That makes the moments feel both normal and ominous. This subtle emotional layering can catch you off guard because it's so unlike the usual emotional roller coaster of most films. Instead of peaks and valleys, you get a slow, persistent pulse of anxiety and melancholy. There are few overt moments of tears or shock, but the emotional impact comes precisely from what Elephant doesn't show as much as from what it does. When the violence finally breaks out, it hits with a cold, matter-of-fact force that's devastating because it's not dramatized or sensationalized. The calm camera work and lack of music make the horror feel stark and real, and that shock resonates long after the scene ends. It's not about gore or spectacle, but about the raw human cost, which can leave viewers feeling hollow and haunted. What's remarkable is how the film invites reflection rather than immediate reaction. It doesn't spell everything out. It leaves gaps and unanswered questions, which encourages viewers to think deeply about what they've seen. People often find themselves replaying scenes in their minds, trying to piece together character motivations, social dynamics, and the fragile threads that led to tragedy. This kind of engagement turns watching Elephant into an active experience rather than passive entertainment. The film also sparks conversation and debate because of its ambiguous narrative and ethical complexity. Viewers often discuss the nature of violence, the role of community in isolation, and how the film's detached style shapes their emotional response. Because it avoids easy answers or moralizing, it becomes a starting point for broader discussions about youth, safety, and empathy. Repeat viewings are common, not because the film has hidden plot twists or flashy reveals, but because its slow pace and observational style invite you to notice new details each time. Characters' expressions, the way scenes overlap, the subtle shifts in tone, all these elements reveal more on a second or third watch. The film's quiet storytelling rewards patience and attention, turning each viewing into a fresh experience. In the end, Elephant engages its audience by creating a lingering emotional atmosphere rather than triggering immediate reactions. It's a film that settles into your mind, making you feel the weight of ordinary moments and the fragility of life in a way that stays with you long after credits roll. Elephant sits in a very unique space when compared to other films dealing with similar subject matter, especially school shootings or youth violence. While many films in this genre often rely on heightened drama, explicit backstories, and emotional catharsis, Elephant takes a dramatically different path, choosing subtlety, quiet observation, and a near-documentary style over sensationalism. It's almost like it's a calm before, during, and after the storm, refusing to dramatize what others might sensationalize. Compared to other films that tackle school shootings, like Bowling for Columbine or We Need to Talk About Kevin, Elephant strips away much of the moralizing and narrative explanation. It doesn't try to offer answers or political commentary up front. Instead, it puts you right inside a day at school, letting the tragedy unfold in almost real time and forcing you to reckon with the banality and horror intertwined in everyday moments. This approach can feel disarming, even uncomfortable, but it's also what makes the film stand apart. If you look at Gus Van Sant's own filmography, Elephant feels like a continuation of his fascination with mood, atmosphere, and human behavior, something he explored in Jerry with its long takes and minimal plot. Both films experiment with time and space, favoring immersive, often ambiguous storytelling over conventional narrative structures. But where Jerry was more about isolation in the wilderness, Elephant brings that loneliness into the hypersocial environment of a high school, which gives the film an added layer of tension and cultural relevance. In contrast to Hollywood's typical thrillers or teen dramas, which often dramatize youth with exaggerated conflicts, clear villains, and cathartic resolutions, Elephant refuses to follow that formula. The characters are neither heroes nor villains in the traditional sense. They're almost faceless, passed into the frame with quiet anonymity, which forces viewers to look deeper and fill in the emotional blanks themselves. The pacing is languid where others might be fast and frantic. The dialogue sparse where others might be dense with exposition. Stylistically, the long takes and static framing set it apart from similar films that use quick cuts and handheld cameras to create chaos and immediacy. The cinematography works against typical genre expectations, creating a meditative, almost hypnotic experience rather than adrenaline-fueled tension. It's more about how the film makes you feel time passing than what happens in each moment. In the broader context of films about youth violence and social alienation, Elephant can be seen as both companion and a counterpoint to movies like The Virgin Suicides or Donnie Darko, which also explore teenage isolation, but with more narrative flourish or fantasy elements. Elephant keeps its feet firmly on the ground, making its story feel like an unfiltered slice of reality rather than filtered through symbolism or genre tropes. Ultimately, Elephant offers something new not by inventing new story beats, but by stripping away the usual storytelling crutches and presenting the material in a raw, observational way. It's less about what happens and more about how it happens, and how the quiet, everyday moments can suddenly become hauntingly significant. That's what sets it apart from its peers and cements its place as a distinctive, unsettling film experience. Elephant might at first seem like a straightforward, almost documentary-style depiction of a day in a high school, but if you look closer, it's sprinkled with subtle symbolism and visual metaphors that deepen the story's impact and echo its themes in clever, haunting ways. These elements don't jump out with neon signs. They're more like whispers hidden in plain sight, inviting you to notice the small details that add layers of meaning beneath the surface. One of the most striking motifs is the recurring use of reflections and windows. Characters are often framed through glass or seen in mirrors, creating a visual double or distortion. This isn't just a stylistic choice, but a metaphor for fractured identities and the way these teenagers see and don't see each other. The glass can symbolize barriers, both emotional and social, that separate people even when they're physically close. It also hints at the theme of invisibility, with a character seen present but somehow distant or unreachable, trapped behind a transparent wall that keeps true feelings and struggles hidden. Hallways themselves become symbolic corridors of fate. The camera often follows characters as they walk long stretches of the school's halls, empty or crowded, with steady, unhurried shots. These corridors feel like a labyrinth or a slow march toward an inevitable destination. The repetition of these shots emphasizes routine and inevitability, as if everyone is unknowingly walking into the same tragic moment. The long hallways also echo feelings of isolation despite being surrounded by others, underscoring the loneliness at the heart of the story. Lighting and shadow work quietly but effectively as metaphors. Natural, often harsh fluorescent lighting casts stark shadows in the school, creating pockets of darkness where tensions lurk. The interplay of light and shadow can suggest the dual nature of the characters, their public personas versus private emotions, or hint at the lurking danger beneath the day's calm surface. The shadows creeping along walls or floors often seem to move independently, almost like silent witnesses to what's unfolding. Objects that seem mundane take on symbolic weight too. The lockers, for example, represent personal spaces yet are cold metal boxes, secure yet impersonal. They stand for the compartmentalization of identity, the way students lock away parts of themselves or keep secrets hidden. The repeated shots of students opening and closing lockers become a ritualistic motif about what's revealed and what's concealed. Another fascinating metaphor is the use of the camera within the camera. Several scenes include characters filming each other or themselves on camcorders or cell phones, a nod to the way youth culture interacts with technology and documentation. This layering calls attention to the act of watching and being watched, raising questions about perspective, reality, and how moments are recorded or distorted. It adds a self-reflective dimension, where the film comments on observation itself, how we see others, how we're seen, and how distance or detachment grows through the lens. Even silence functions as a symbolic element. The absence of dialogue or sound in key moments isn't just a stylistic choice. It becomes a metaphor for communication breakdowns and emotional emptiness. The quiet spaces between words shout as loudly as the eventual violent outbreak, emphasizing how much remains unspoken and unnoticed. Repetitive, almost ritualistic actions, like characters tying shoes, locking doors, or walking to the same halls multiple times, also work as metaphors for cyclical behavior and the inescapability of certain social dynamics. These motions feel like small ticks of a clock, counting down, reminding the audience of the slow build catastrophe. In these ways, Elephant uses subtle visual cues and motifs not to explain its story, but to enrich it, deepening the emotional and thematic resonance. These symbols invite viewers to look beyond the surface and find meaning in the quiet moments and overlooked details. It's a film that speaks softly but lingers long, with its metaphors working like a shadow under the skin, making the ordinary feel charged and the unseen feel present. Elephant isn't part of a franchise or series, so it doesn't have to juggle sequels, spin-offs, or a larger narrative universe. Instead, it stands alone as a singular, haunting snapshot of a very specific moment in time. But what makes it interesting is how deeply it's tied to a particular historical and cultural context that gives the film its sharp edge and weight. The film is famously inspired by the tragic Columbine High School massacre of 1999, a real-life event that shocked the world and forever changed the way we think about youth violence and school safety in America. But Elephant doesn't recreate Columbine in a straightforward or documentary fashion. Instead, it opts for a fictionalized, impressionistic approach that captures the atmosphere, emotions, and societal fractures surrounding such an event without getting bogged down in facts or details. This choice makes the film feel both specific and universal. It's about a particular time and place, but also about the larger, ongoing conversation about adolescent alienation and violence. The historical accuracy of the film lies less in recreating exact events or characters, and more in its faithful evocation of the late 1990s American suburban high school experience. From the hairstyles and fashion to the technology, flip phones, camcorders, and bulky backpacks, Elephant immerses you in that era with careful detail. The social dynamics, the layout of the school, and even the music choices, like the infamous use of Beethoven's Für Elise, all anchor the story in its cultural moment. These touches create a vivid, believable backdrop that feels both nostalgic and ominous. The film's real strength in historical context is how it captures the mood of uncertainty and fear that gripped the country in the wake of Columbine. At a time when the idea of school as a safe haven was deeply shaken, Elephant offers a portrait of that new, fragile reality without resorting to sensationalism or explicit commentary. It reflects a confusion and helplessness that many felt, showing a world where violence arrives suddenly and inexplicably in the middle of everyday life. Because it doesn't spoon-feed viewers with dates or news footage, Elephant achieves a timeless quality that keeps it relevant. It doesn't feel like a period piece locked in the past, but rather a mirror held up to ongoing issues of youth, isolation, and gun violence that continue to resonate. The film's place in history is therefore twofold. It documents a cultural moment in the late 90s while also transcending it, speaking to any era grappling with similar tragedies. So while Elephant isn't a historical reenactment or part of franchise saga, it's deeply rooted in a very real historical context. It captures the quiet dread, confusion, and fractured realities of a generation coming to terms with violence in their schools and communities. And that connection to history, handled with subtlety and respect rather than spectacle, is a key part of what gives a film its haunting power and lasting impact. If you're looking to watch Elephant and want to experience in a way that really does justice to its haunting, quiet power, there are a few good options, each offering a slightly different vibe. The film originally had a limited theatrical release back in 2003, so catching on the big screen now might be a bit of a challenge unless you stumble across a special screening at a film festival or an art house cinema that programs retrospectives. If you do get a chance to see it in a theater, that's ideal. There's something about the stillness of the film combined with darkened room and a focused audience that amplifies the slow-building tension and eerie atmosphere. The wide frame and long takes fill the screen and invite you to settle into the rhythm of the day unfolding, which really immerses you. For most viewers today, streaming or digital rental will be the way to go. Elephant is often available on platforms that specialize in independent and art films, so services like Criterion Channel, Mubi, or even select rental options on Amazon Prime Video or iTunes might carry it. Streaming lets you watch at your own pace, but to get the fullest experience, it's best to create a dedicated viewing space. Turn off distractions, use headphones or a good sound system to catch the subtle ambient sounds and near silences that are so crucial to the film's mood. Watching on a decent-sized screen helps too. Elephant uses its framing thoughtfully, and watching on a tiny phone screen can dull the impact. If you rent or buy the digital version, it's worth revisiting the film more than once. The slow pace and observational style reward repeated viewings, revealing new details each time you watch. You might notice small gestures, glances, or background moments that deepen your understanding of the story and characters. Physical copies like DVDs or Blu-rays are a great choice if you want to own a version that often comes with bonus materials, interviews, behind-the-scenes features, and commentary that can add layers to your appreciation of the film. Criterion's editions, if you can find them, are especially prized for this. Lastly, if you happen to live near a university or independent cinema with a strong film program, keep an eye out for screenings tied to discussions or panels. Watching Elephant in a communal setting where people engage afterward can transform the experience into something more interactive and thought-provoking. No matter how you watch it, the key to Elephant is patience and attention. It's not a movie to multitask through or watch casually in the background. Give it your full focus and let its slow, deliberate rhythm wash over you. That's when a film's quiet intensity really hits home. Elephant is one of those films where the budget tells a story all on its own, especially when you look at how its modest financial resources translate into a very polished, deliberate production. The film's budget was relatively low by Hollywood standards, reportedly around $3 million. For a movie that feels so intimate and raw, that number might surprise you at first, because it doesn't rely on flashy special effects, star-studded casts, or big set pieces that typically drive budget sky high. Instead, Elephant focuses on a stripped-down, observational style that uses real locations, natural lighting, and minimal production design, which means every dollar had to be spent with precision and purpose. Despite the modest budget, the production quality doesn't feel cheap or rushed. In fact, the film's craftsmanship is a testament to careful planning and creative choices. Gus Van Sant's direction and the cinematography make the most out of simple settings, mostly a real high school, and a cast of mostly unknown actors, which keeps costs down while enhancing the authenticity. The long takes, steady shots, and subtle camera movements are economical but artistically bold decisions that lend the film a hypnotic, immersive quality. So, in terms of production value relative to budget, Elephant is a great example of how less can be more. The film's aesthetic feels deliberate and artful, not limited by finances but rather defined by the creative vision. Now, on the box office front, Elephant had a modest commercial run. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, where it actually won the Palme d'Or, which gave a strong critical boost, but didn't exactly translate into blockbuster earnings. The film grossed around $4.1 million worldwide, which, when compared to its budget, means it technically made back its production costs and then some, but it wasn't a runaway financial hit by any stretch. It's more of an art house success, appealing primarily to cinephiles and festival audiences rather than mainstream moviegoers looking for high-octane thrills or dramatic spectacle. Marketing for Elephant was relatively low-key and targeted. The film's sensitive subject matter, school shootings, made wide marketing campaigns tricky, and the film's slow, observational style didn't lend itself well to flashy trailers or conventional promotional pushes. Instead, it found its audience mostly through word of mouth, critical acclaim, and festival buzz. This limited marketing reach likely kept its box office numbers modest, but helped maintain its serious tone and respect for the topic. Audience reception was mixed in some quarters. While many praised the film's subtlety and artistic approach, some viewers found its slow pacing and minimal narrative frustrating, which should have limited wider appeal and repeat viewings. That said, the film has gained a strong cult following over time and remains an important, often discussed work in discussions of cinematic portrayals of youth violence. So, Elephant lives in a sweet spot where its modest budget was turned into a haunting, artful piece of cinema through smart production choices, and its financial performance reflects its niche appeal. It didn't need a blockbuster haul to make an impact. It's one of those films where artistic success and cultural resonance outweigh the box office tally, though it did manage to recoup its costs and earn respect along the way.